So, welcome to Ageless Living the Wisdom Keepers. It's our opportunity to spend time with authors and experts from around the world who we really value and who we believe are making significant contributions to our time. And today we're really privileged to have Mark Nepo join us. Mark is a beloved poet. He's a teacher and storyteller. He's also one of the finest spiritual guides of our time. And the Watkins Journal, one of the more prestigious publications in the world, names him as one of the 100 most influential spiritual beings of our time. He's also part of Oprah's SuperSoul 100, which is a gift. And I know, Mark, that you enjoy your time with her. You've been on a number of times. We had the privilege of presenting Mark with an AgeNation Life Achievement Award several years ago. And that award is given out to individuals who are in the second half of life, who we believe exemplify the highest standards of their individual careers and professions. And so 22 books, 15 audio programs, he just doesn't stop. And so, Mark, welcome, really.
Oh, it's great to be with you, as always. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Mark, I'd like to begin our time together. I mean, I don't think 3 or 4 months ago any of us expected the humanity to stop and to the world to experience the serious level of physical loss of life and the financial crisis that we're all somehow or another going to be impacted by. But talk a little bit, would you, about your perspective on this extraordinary time that we're passing through?
Yeah, sure, George. And I think it's very profound. And I think one of the things I start with is, as you know from my work, many years ago, over 30 years ago, in my 30s, I almost died from a rare form of lymphoma. I'm now 69, and I've been amazed that emotionally, a lot of, I feel, what we're going through collectively echoes a lot of what I went through individually. And the first thing that really strikes my heart is that I remember, being diagnosed back then, and I went to a doctor's office kind of like in disbelief and stunned that something was up. And when I was diagnosed and when I left that office, the door that I had entered through was gone. There was no way to return to the life that was a half hour earlier. And I feel this has happened to us as a human tribe. The life of that was 3-4 months ago is gone. And understandably, we're all having trouble accepting that, dealing with it, feeling it. And what I see around us in our society, I see whole pockets of our society stuck in different stages of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, which are denial and anger and bartering and depression and finally acceptance. And she speaks that they're not sequential. You may not feel all of them. You may feel several more than one time. And you can see that, we have, just look at this past weekend, we have huge pockets of our society that are just swimming in denial. And other parts that are in anger, protesting what? Gravity, biology, it's wow. And so, I feel like, as happens for all of us, great love and great suffering always drop us into the depth of life. And we have been dropped into the depth of life. And I know for me that, cancer is nothing magical about cancer. It's a disease just like the coronavirus. But what is opened in us is always more important than what opens us. And, back those years ago, I was turned inside out and upside down and transformed. And we are all being transformed as we speak, whether we resist it or not. And there's a great Roman saying that goes that, the fates lead those who are willing, those who are not, they drag. So we're going one way or the other. And if we resist, we double our suffering. And so, I feel that we have to be gentle with ourselves and brave to face. It's interesting that as we are in such need externally of masks to protect each other, to care for each other, masks for our healthcare workers, inwardly we're being asked at the same time to drop all our masks. We're being asked to be more naked, more tender, more vulnerable, more real. And so that all the traditions speak about, the Hindus say, thou art that, we are one and the same. In Confucius is the author of the Golden Rule, so this is why it's so troubling and maddening that people are making a protest of not wearing masks when it is becoming very real. It's not abstract. When you wear a mask, you care for each other. We are each other, and to care, and I feel very strongly that the humanity is a global body, and every soul is a cell in that body. And taking care of ourselves is keeping humanity healthy. So, I feel like we're also being forced into a global Sabbath. Wayne Muller's book on Sabbath many years ago, the cornerstone was in the Jewish tradition, the word Sabbath literally means the one day we don't turn one thing into another. And we have been forced globally to stop turning one thing into another, to stop bending, manipulating, going from here to there, scheming, rushing, even dreaming, so that we can see the sanctity that's always there. I was very struck that in reflecting on all this, that, somewhere 5-6 months ago, under the busy hive of humanity rushing everywhere, in the microscopic silent fabric of existence, one atom shifted in its relationship to the atoms around it, and the coronavirus was born and has been speeding all over the globe. And it calls up in me that we have to put hesitation aside. Love needs to move as quickly as disease. Give needs to move as quickly as take. There is no time for hesitation. And that the door that we can't go out into the world, when we can't go out, turn around and go in. Turn around and go in. So, I think that, and we can talk more, but I think that about all this, I think, fear is important to talk about, because fear is the other virus. It's the corollary virus right now. And I know, again, back to my cancer journey, in my 30s, I was terrified of everything. I had no experience at anything this dramatic, this foundational, shaking, this life-threatening. And so I was terrified of everything. And fear at that level exhausts our heart. And so, one thing is that I feel it's very important to right-size our fear, to feed other than our fear. And so, the things off in the news I remember back then I had to discern what doctors and nurses were saying to me, because at a certain point, even well-meaning doctors were speaking about what they didn't know, whether I was going to live or die. And that was not helpful. And I find today, listening to the news, I'm being asked to do the same thing. We all are, to sort what is helpful and what is not, what is true and what is speculation. And, because basically when it gets to speculation, then whatever network it is, even the experts who are speaking, they start speaking about what they don't know. And it'd be more, they just have cameras on them. It would be more helpful if they admitted they don't know and that they're afraid too. So one of the things we're being challenged, I think, globally is at this time is we're being asked to become more intimate with the unknown. Yes, the unknown can bring disaster and catastrophe, but the unknown also brings wonder and joy and surprise and beauty and love. After all, there's not one person I've ever loved or been loved by, a partner or friend, that I ever planned to meet.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a way, just some of what has been stirring in my heart.
So, Mark, as always, one of the things that always amazes me about time that I spend with you is that it doesn't take very long for me to come into kind of the synchronistic rhythm of life that your words and your images create. It's one of your gifts, clearly. And as we talk a little bit about your writing and some of your books, I know we're going to revisit some of the good advice and insights that you've just shared with us. So, I've been a fan for a long time. As you know, Sadina and I spend time almost every day with these dog-eared copies of the Book of Awakening,
Thank you.
And one of the gifts that you bring in your writing is that your writing is timeless. So you write a book of awakening, which is designed to be a daily reader. And it doesn't matter what year you're in. It doesn't matter what day the 26th of May falls on. The wisdom that's contained in the things that you write is really timeless and applicable. And each time I read another daily reminder, I find another twist, another thing, like peeling back an onion and I get another layer, another insight. And it really is. It's one of the things I love about your work. And when we talk about your new book in a little bit, the Book of Soul, we'll find that a lot of the same praise, at least that Sadina and I have for your work, continues to apply, And then, of course, other books, Drinking from the River of Light, an early book on 7,000 Ways to Listen that I still love. And More Together Than Alone, and Things That Join the Sea and the Sky, and on and on. Wonderful stuff. So before I ask you about some of your writing, I want to tell you a little story, and our viewers at the same time. A number of years ago, I had the privilege of meeting an old man, a carver, whose name was Jose de Kreft. And Jose was one of the few men who still practice what was called direct carving. And if you've if any of our viewers or you have been to the sailing pond in Central Park, Jose, in his early years when he was doing modeling with clays and waxes, he did all of those Alice in Wonderland pieces that are in and around the sailing pond at Central Park. But then as he aged, he began to be more exclusively a direct carver. And so he was 92 when I met him. He was the only sculpting teacher or mentor that I ever had. And he introduced me to this process of direct carving. And it's a process where, as an artist, I don't do drawings or maquettes or studies. I just begin working with the material, the wood, the stone, the clay, the wax. And the idea is to develop a rhythm and a rapport, a relationship with it. And out of that, then a piece emerges instead of being imposed on the material. So one day I was working in my studio and Jose happened to stop by. He was in New York at the time. And I was really being impatient and pissed off about things. And he said to me, what's going on? And I said, well, obviously I haven't established rapport with this piece of stone because I'm getting nothing, I don't know where to go. And he stopped and he looked at me and he said, George, he said, I think you've got your roles confused. He said, your job is to become the best instrument you can possibly become. And the music comes from God. So if you become a better instrument and you keep working at that, eventually the music flows and you form the quality of relationship. And when I read your stuff, that's my experience of you.
No.
Yeah. So before we get to the specifics, can you share a little bit about your process?
Yeah, well, thank you, George. That's so beautiful and speaks so deeply to me because I do resonate with that exactly. That is exactly how I feel. I feel that I retrieve the books more than create them out of nothing, or as you say, impose, an outline or a structure. And so my process has been, and I learned this early on, it's very much, I feel the same way, is, D.H. Lawrence has a line in one of his poems, not I, but the wind that blows through me. And so I feel very much I bring all of who I am to it, but I discover more than invent. And so my process has been for many, many decades now. In the very beginning, early in my 20s, of course, everyone is teaching the other way. Everyone is teaching, find good material, have a good idea, have a good outline. And so in the beginning, when I started to do that, well, life didn't speak to me that way. I've always been a scribbler, and so I would see something, feel something, hear something, discover a metaphor, jot down an image, and then see where could I use it in filling that. Well, that quickly gave way to, it was the discovery that was everything. And so I am always, without intent or having any sense of where it will go, recording, retrieving images, metaphors, feelings, a line, a paragraph, a scene. And then I like finding little shells on the seashore. I just gather them and I throw them in a bucket, a file. And my process over time is that, as I have not outlines, but feelings for what books might be, those are bigger buckets. And those have a place. And then so every, week, at the end of every week, I take the shells I've found, and this is informed by my cancer journey of almost not being here. And then I look at them and I say, okay, intuitively, if all I have is right now, where do they belong? And I throw them into the bigger buckets. And then I go back out to the sea and the shore and keep collecting. And then eventually, when I have enough in the bucket that is kind of a book, or what could be a larger container, then I dump that out and I see what they all say to me. I listen. So writing is listening and taking notes more than saying anything. So then I take that and I see, and then out of that larger bucket, I mean, because then each fragment, because I attended immediately, I've been blessed to have a very kind of photographic memory my whole life, but I always retrieve things immediately because they're three-dimensional. They are more like a sculpture. They have color, texture. Whereas if I remember them even accurately, they're just silhouettes. So I always, when I dump out this larger bucket, I spread them out and I say, talk to me. And I listen, and then then they start to present their own organic form. Some come into the foreground and they become like, themes or structures or sections to a book. And then others start to say, well, we should begin here, or this is where we should end, or this should be the centerpiece. And then often what happens is, as I unfold that organic map of all of what I've retrieved, and inevitably there are things that are saying, well, here I need to write my way from one to the other. It forms a constellation. I need to write my way from one to the other, and eventually it becomes a draft of what we would call a book. But, so I only work with what I retrieve through that direct carving that you speak to. I'm so touched that you sense that in everything, because it's a devotion. It's a devotion to more than what I can speak. And I only write, even writing between them, I only write when I'm in my heart. If it goes to my head, I stop and walk away. So it's a different kind of discipline. It's not a discipline. Early we were taught that discipline is perseverance, or don't be distracted, stick to it. No, discipline now for me is, as soon as things move out of my heart, drop it.
Well, all that you say, Mark, is so abundantly obvious in the words that happen on your page. And as you talk about collecting the shells, I'm reminded of something that I read about Thomas Wolfe, that he used to have a barrel in his study, apparently, and his way of collecting shells was he would scribble notes on matchbook covers and napkins and whatnot, and he'd keep throwing them in the barrel. And, when the barrel was full, he knew that he had a book. He didn't ever go back into it, but he knew that he had done enough listening and enough, exploring. And when you talk about, you're recalling and that you're listening, I find sometimes when I write, I'll lose pages that I've written. And so I'll then go back and rewrite them. And then I'll discover the pages that I had lost or thought I had lost. And it's amazing how the download is so similar the second time to the first. And I think to myself, who or where in history did I write this, or what level of consciousness did it come through?
And I think that, and also, I feel that there's been two things that have been blessings that have allowed me to be so prolific. And, the first is exactly what we're talking about, that I write about what I don't know. I write about, the books are inquiries. they're not reportings of what I know. They're paths of inquiry. And so there's a lot I don't know. So that's why I'm able to write a lot. If I only wrote about what I knew, I would have written very little. And the other does come out of, one of the things that happened when I woke on the other side of almost dying in my 30s was that before that I was a driven artist. And I woke up still here and my drive was gone. And it was very disorienting. And I was very troubled, did I survive? And yet was the price my gift, but I started to realize after about 6 or 8 months that I was drawn to things, not driven anymore. And that made things joyous. And that made things incredibly wide and deep, beyond any map my mind could create. And so the image was one of before my cancer journey, I was like, if you think of a river like the Mississippi or a strong river, and it's held by its banks and it makes a lot of noise as it rushes to the sea. And that's how I knew that I was creative. I recognized that noise. But almost dying, I reached the mouth of the river, and that current didn't disappear, it went deeper. And it joined the larger sea, the sea of oneness. And so it was quieter. It ran deeper, but it made no noise. And so, and it enabled me to listen beyond the noise of my own creativity, and thus retrieve even more.
Yeah, that's, I know that anyone out there who has ever either tried to write or is writing or longs to write, you have given them a pathway to also follow the river to the sea if they're willing to listen, since we're talking about writing and sculpting, another thing that I discovered in my writing was that when I forced it a lot, I hated editing. I hated going back and refining or re-experiencing. And then one day I realized that when I carve, especially when I carve stone, as Jose reminded me, I must hit that stone with a hammer and a point chisel thousands and thousands of times in the carving of a piece. And one day he said to me, if you don't like the hitting of the stone a point chisel at a time, you're in the wrong area, because that's what you're going to do most of the time. And what I found is I now look at my revisiting the raw stuff that I've written in the same way. It's like I'm hitting the stone or the words with the chisel, and I find that each one brings me closer to beauty or meaning or understanding.
Yeah, I feel that I agree completely. I so believe in effort, and I feel because I never know when grace will show up, so I believe in effort, and I do think that effort is revelation in slow motion.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yes, we have to love the process. And I also think that, I too feel that I've learned over time that the closer I am to source, the less I have to mess with the words.
Uh-huh.
And so if I wasn't, this is a deeper understanding of revision. We tend to think of revision as the economical pruning of language. But it's really going back to the original vision to get closer.
Yeah.
So if I'm having a real hard time revising or saying something clearly, I don't mess with the words anymore. I throw it away and say I wasn't close enough, or when I was close enough, I wasn't clear enough.
Uh-huh.
Go revision, go back to the original vision and try again. Try again to be a clear vessel. Try again to be touched by the source of life through whatever I was near and looking at and wanting to be my teacher. And then if I'm close enough, there's very little that has to be done.
Mhm. So with that level of understanding now that viewers have about your process, which is indeed a description, I think, of the process we all need to use just every day in living, whether we're writers or sculptors or mechanics or
Absolutely, absolutely.
I want to first I want to mention something that has always stuck with me from the Book of Awakening, and that's I don't even remember where you say it, but you say that what we reach for may be different, but what makes us reach is the same. And so whenever I think of division and differences and whatnot, I try to remember, how can I get to that place of connectivity where I am in touch with what is causing us and making us, prompting us to reach, instead of worrying about what it is that each one of us is reaching for. I mean, there's another old Russian expression. I think it says that if you give children something to play with and they don't cry, then everything is okay. In some ways, if we could remember that going through life, it probably would help us enormously. But
well, and I do feel that the creative process, the expressive process, let's get even below creative, which is at the heart of my book, Drinking from the River of Light, it shapes us.
Yes.
By devoting ourselves to any, I've really been working with this metaphor recently that just as a fire needs wood to burn bright, the soul needs care. And just as a fire, it doesn't matter whether the wood that's thrown on it is ash or maple. The soul doesn't care. It doesn't matter to the soul what we care about, just that we care. The soul needs care to burn bright. There are infinite things to care about. Any one will do.
So let's talk about the Book of Soul.
Sure.
So first of all, it's your latest, and it's now out. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And I was blessed to read it in an earlier version. I'm blessed to read it again, and I cannot recommend more heartily to everyone that's watching, run out and buy this book, the Book of Soul. 52 Paths to Living What Matters. What's interesting is the Book of Awakening was a daily reader, and this you've created as a weekly reader.
Yes. Yes. I've always, and even, all my books, I encourage, my readers not to race through them, but to live with them. And that's basically just a handrail to structure that kind of slowing down. I just invite, of course you can read it any way you want, and you don't even have to read it in order, but I do invite people to take a chapter a week, be with it and live your life. Be with it and live your life. Let the conversation thread between your life and whatever might be opened by these chapters.
You've divided it into 4 sections, our walk in the world, our true inheritance, widening our circle and helping each other stay awake. Did you think of seasons when you decided on 4?
No, very much as we were talking about process earlier, as I dump my bucket, this bucket, the organic themes that started to present themselves from all those shells and pieces and fragments and passages fell into these 4 kind of streams that I then named. They're saying, no, this is name it this way. And from that I learned, again, it wasn't an outline that I filled. I learned from this that, and so the central metaphor of the book, as you know, is labor, one of being labor, but the labor of birth. That, we're all here by the grace and courage of our mothers who physically went through that miraculous, awful process of literally bringing us into the world. And then a second labor begins. And this is the labor of a lifetime of experience through which the soul is birthed on earth. And at first, we, of course, learn how to walk in the world. And so easily we can be distracted, which is part of the journey of the incarnation of being here that everyone has to face. And what are then our true inheritance? And I start that section. I ran across that the word war goes back to an Indo-European word, wers, W-E-R-S, which means to confuse and mix up. And so, all the traditions speak about what it means to be a spiritual warrior, and this just led me to add one more wrinkle to that, and one more layer, and that is a spiritual warrior is one who is devoted to the clearing of confusion within us and between us, which is very relevant right now.
Yes.
Very relevant right now. What is it? What can anyone who's viewing or watching or listening, what is it in your life today specifically? Can you identify one confusion that needs clearing within you and around you? Because that leads us to our true inheritance, which is our direct connection with life. To restore that direct connection, the widening our circle section really, I found a quote from Einstein in which it's a longer quote, but essentially I use it to open that section, where he says, we see that we think that what's intimate are our personal relationships and what's close by, but really our life call is to widen our circle of compassion so that everything is intimate, everything, and there we're left on the path helping each other stay awake. So the final chapter of the book is called "The Temple is the World," and I think that this book has taught me, this is the teaching of what I'm trying to stay devoted to now. We need sacred friendships and relationships and sanghas and churches and mosques and temples. We need everything, schools, but they all have walls, no matter how sacred. And the end of all those sacred pursuits is to bring the walls down. The temple is the world. The sanctity is everywhere. And ironically, now when we can't physically go anywhere, we're asked to be in our heart and in our true inheritance so we can inhabit the spiritual fact that the temple is the world.
Yeah, it's humbling when I think of the number of times I forget that, Mark,
Me too.
It's humbling when I experience the fact that I'm still, especially in this time where I keep longing for authentic leadership and I keep longing for men and women to rise up, men and women of discernment and intelligence and conscience and whatnot, and help humanity make this passage, And then I think, well, perhaps this is a passage where there aren't going to be any men or women on white horses, and we're going to have to rise up ourselves and make the passage. But still, because of the amount of animosity and division that I experience in the world around me, remembering that each being is sacred, each moment is sacred, each opportunity is sacred, is something I just forget a hell of a lot these days. And then I have to keep rewinding.
Well, I think we have to live in the seeming tension of these seeming opposites, because one of the, you know, certainly there is such hostility and division, but there have always been. We have more cameras on it than in any age. But the journey of incarnation of the global family has always been to move from separateness to oneness, to move from division to wholeness. You know, Native Americans have a beautiful difference they make. I think I mentioned it in this book. I can't remember which book, but it's the difference between the experience of oneness and harmony. And that oneness is an individual alignment. But harmony is that resonance among us, between us. And, you know, in the Buddhist tradition, and this is defined, I've learned, there's some disagreement about this among in the Buddhist tradition, but there is Hinayana and Mahayana paths, and the words, yana means raft, and Hinayana means small raft, and Mahayana means big raft. And of course, I've learned this is defined by the Mahayana group, so the Hinayana don't really take issue with it. But what's instructive here, regardless of that argument, the theological argument, is the fact that the Hinayana path is, yes, we want to be together, but it's basically an inside job. It's a solo job. Okay, it's a small raft that can be joined with other rafts, but you got to make it whole yourself, which is true. The Mahayana raft says, but we're more, our destinies are more tied together than that. Yes, and it's a bigger raft. And so this leads into the paradox of that we are more together than alone. You know, we have always, forever, and will be forever. The only path to full aliveness is through presence. Nothing can replace my direct experience of life. The paradox, however, is if I'm only left with my experience of life, oh brother, because there's so much more than my presence, the practice of presence, the vow of true presence, of having nothing in the way, of having an open heart, a tender heart, a courageous heart, is that then I am accessed, I become a conduit to your presence. And when your presence and my presence meet, we have meaning. And we are forever. We need presence to access meaning. We need presence to access meaning. And we have to be all that we can be, which no one can do for us. And, we can't be stuck in our own experience only, and we do have I keep my practice in this divisive time is, if I had hair, I watch the news and I'd pull it out, and then I have to breathe and say, we are they, there is no they. Not swing from pole to pole, but to feel my human reaction, to feel how upset I am at how people are not wearing masks, making some kind of protest out of it, which makes no sense to me, and breathe and say, we are they. There is no they. And I don't understand that gap, but I can only, the heart is meant to let everything in so it can absorb and integrate. I need to feel that gap, not analyze it.
Well, Mark, as always, it's a pleasure having the opportunity to spend time with you in these kinds of conversations. I treasure these times, and I look forward to more. I'm reminded that in the back cover, the inside, I mean, one of the things I love about your book is what you have inside the front and back cover. And this, the purpose of any dream is to exercise the heart until it awakens. Once living in the open, there is no career but being kind. And so this remembering that I am they is certainly something worthy to leave people with. I understand when Aldous Huxley was passing away, there were a group of friends in attendance in an outside room. And they picked one person to go into the room to ask Aldous if he had any final words. And apparently his final advice was to be kind. You know, and so it's I hope viewers will have a chance to view this again and again, because as always, you leave us with a huge pool of things to think on and feel and probe. And so thank you for being so generous with your time. And thank you.
Oh, thank you, George. Just a joy.
Blessings.